What It Takes Radio Company brings you another adventure with inconvenient ideas. And today we're going to talk about the Indianapolis 500 and Memorial Day and Decoration Day and what it might mean to be fully alive yet today. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Stan Houston once again with inconvenient ideas. And one of the inconvenient ideas I had to deal with was that there were a whole lot of start over things that I had to get going for the summer that is before me. And so I was very, very busy doing a number with my dear partner, Karen. How can we, as a couple, as parents, as people who run a business, and people who have community and other responsibilities, what can we do that in 26 we can really create a number of start over situations in our world today? So that's a little bit of the inconvenience, but we're back with, I hope, will also be some helpful inconvenient ideas. Now remember, many inconvenient ideas are very good ideas, but a good idea is oftentimes very inconvenient. And for some people, even a very good idea is very inconvenient, and they will oppose it because it's not very convenient for them. That's where we oftentimes are. One of the things I've often taught, particularly as a broadcaster, is if everybody is talking about it at a particular time, don't. So on the Sunday just passed, the Indianapolis 500 was the big news story, and a lot of people talked about it. So I say, don't. Yesterday was Memorial Day, or what we called in our growing up Decoration Day, and obviously everybody was talking about it. Don't. Talk about that some other day. Just be a little bit different. And so what today I would like to do is I would like to talk about, as you see, something that occurred on what day? Sunday. And yesterday was Memorial Day, Decoration Day. And we're going to have some thoughts about that going through even this week. So here we go. Now, what I'm going to do, one of the reasons I have my funky reading glasses on, I'm going to do something that I very seldom do, and that is to actually read something. Now, here's what happened. Just this morning, I asked my AI character, I said, last Sunday was the running of the Indianapolis 500 race. I lived as a young boy in Indiana, and we were always interested in the 500 that was always done on what was called Decoration Day, or the real May 31st Memorial Day. I need a check on a childhood recollection. As I recall, part of the drama of the Indy 500 was that it was very dangerous, and that one of the drivers being killed in a wreck was not uncommon. I remember one in particular because it was a very famous driver. Please help me discover whether the idea of the Indy 500 being dangerous and part of the appeal was the crashes and the wrecks that took place. Or is that just a childhood recollection that really didn't make any difference? That's what I said. And now this demonstrates the power of artificial intelligence, because it then came forward and wrote this entire script, which is an incredible piece of publication, which only I was not the writer of, but I was the author or the creator of the idea, and the AI did the writing. Here's what I got from the robot. The Indianapolis 500, speed, danger, memory, and American mythology. a reflective essay on the danger, drama, and cultural memory surrounding the Indianapolis 500. A childhood memory that was real. Your memory is not exaggerated at all, Stan. The Indianapolis 500 was considered extraordinarily dangerous for much of its history, and part of the fascination, especially from the 1930s through the 1970s, was precisely that mixture of speed, courage, patriotism, spectacle, and risk. For many Americans, especially in Indiana and throughout the Midwest, the 500 was almost a sacred ritual of late May and Memorial Day weekend. Families gathered around radios and later televisions. Drivers became folk heroes. Yet underneath the celebration was a very real awareness that somebody might not come home alive. The danger was very real. In the early decades of the Indy 500, fatalities were tragically common. The cars were primitive compared to modern standards. Drivers sat in open cockpits with little protection. Fuel tanks could rupture. Fires were frequent. Helmets and safety systems were minimal. The speeds were astonishing for the technology of the time. Drivers were viewed almost like test pilots or gladiators. Newspapers often described them as fearless men willing to risk everything for glory and victory. Over the history of the race, dozens of drivers, mechanics, and others connected to the event lost their lives either during the race itself, in practice sessions, or during qualifying. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway earned a reputation as both legendary and unforgiving. One of the most famous tragedies involved Bill Vukovich, one of the greatest drivers of the Indianapolis history. Vukovich was killed during the 1955 Indianapolis 500 while leading the race. His death shocked the racing world because many believed he was virtually unbeatable at the speedway. For fans of that generation, Vukovich's death became symbolic of the terrible cost of speed. Other legendary names connected with the dangerous years of Indy racing included Jimmy Bryan, Swede Savage, Tony Bettenhausen. Now that's one that I remembered, as well as Bill Vukovich, though I had forgotten his name. Eddie Sachs and Dave McDonald. The 1964 crash involved Eddie Sachs and Dave McDonald was especially horrifying and helped force major changes in racing safety. But part of the appeal was the risk. Modern audiences forget how much danger shaped the mythology of automobile racing. People did not generally watch hoping someone would die, but the awareness that disaster could happen at any moment created enormous drama. Drivers were admired because they knowingly faced danger. The tension between triumph and tragedy became part of the emotional power of the event. The same atmosphere surrounded early aviation, boxing, mountain climbing, and many frontier-style pursuits. America admired daring. Decoration Day and Memorial Day. Your recollection, Stan, of Decoration Day is historically important. Before Memorial Day became more commercialized, it carried a deeper spirit of remembrance, sacrifice, courage, and national identity. The Indianapolis 500 became closely linked with that atmosphere. In many ways, the drivers themselves symbolized a particular American ideal: boldness, innovation, toughness, and the willingness to risk everything. For boys growing up in Indiana, hearing the roar of the engines and the dramatic radio broadcasts made the race feel larger than life. This is me as a child. I remember this so much. Modern Indy car racing is dramatically safer than it once was. Improvements include energy absorbing walls, fire resistant suits, advanced helmets, enclosed survival cells, safer fuel systems, and highly trained emergency medical teams. Fatalities are now far rarer than in earlier generations, although racing still involves real danger. Ironically, some longtime fans believe that as safety improved, part of the old mystique disappeared. The sport became more technical and less mythical. A story worth sharing. Now remember, this is not me writing this. I authored it, but I didn't write it. Your memory touches something bigger than racing itself. The Indianapolis 500 represented a period in American culture when courage and danger were publicly intertwined. Heroes were often people who accepted enormous personal risk in pursuit of excellence. The deaths were not celebrated, but the willingness to face danger was deeply respected. For many young people growing up in Indiana and across America, the Indianapolis 500 became part sport, part mythology, and part national memory. A dramatic yearly reminder of speed, ambition, courage, and the unpredictable nature of life itself. Back home again in Indiana became more than a song. For generations, it was part of the emotional soundtrack of courage, memory, and American storytelling. There we go. That's a couple of days after the Indianapolis 500. And I think it was probably something very unique and different. And it has a few inconvenient ideas in many, many respects. Something we have to think about what we remembered, about who we are today, and perhaps what we admire and what we might become. It reminds us that the world does change. It changes a lot. And how well we are prepared to go back and look at the memory of those things and say, what can we learn from them? And now, as an older man, as an old man, how do I deal with those things that I learned? And in fact, that's a lot of what I was thinking about and what I remembered so much about Decoration Day. I really did. What a day it was. Besides the Indy 500, there was the parades and going to the cemetery and the 21 gun salute and those things. And now, as I've gotten older, I'm not just remembering the fact that many, 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 mostly young men, but of course, young men and women died in battle and in combat. But the thing that has really struck me now as an older man, as an old man, and by the way, I dealt with the idiosyncrasies of Vietnam and thought I was going there, and then it changed, and the 3 or 4 good friends that I lost there. And then I remember walking, as I will talk about on June 6th, Omaha Beach and D-Day, and among the gravestones that scattered all around that battlefield. And to remember that most of those men, young men, boys, not only died, they had no life. Here I, along with many of you, we've lived a long and full life with many triumphs and tragedies and adventures, but most of them never had a life. Never had a life. And that has really struck me in terms of gratitude for my own experience and deep appreciation that it was not a point of sacrifice for their nation. It was the fact that they never had a life at all. Those of us who do sometimes complain about it, but we forget the many millions who never had a life. And we should give more than a good memory. We should give profound thanks and gratitude and ask that God will, in special ways, bless their memories, their families. One of my best friends or relative still, I believe, deals with the fact that her father was killed just at the end of the war. And she was fatherless for most of her life. Those are things that I remember just a couple days after Memorial Day and the roar of the engines of the Indy 500. If this has been helpful and hopeful, I hope you'll share it with others and pass it on. Please remember, that's what we are in the business of doing, is perhaps taking the past, bringing it fully into the present, making it real, and then finding ways that we can create a life and a destiny that has deep memories, but also formations and transformations that we who are privileged to be alive can be fully alive, not only for ourselves, but for our family, for our friends and relationships, and for our business, and for many others, that we can be living examples of fully aliveness. I'd love to be a part of helping you explore that both in life and business. Just reach out to me at stan@witradio.net, stan@witradio.net. We'll be back with a few more inconvenient ideas. That's part of our regular deal from now on. The only thing that will change in the start over is now it's not going to be just me. It's going to be many of you who will join me with a very often discussion of powerful and helpful and unique ways to be successful and happier and useful when you share some of your inconvenient ideas. Till your part in that, stay with me. We'll make this happen. Till next time, bye for now.